Okay, hello everyone. Today we have another special presentation from the MedTech Talent Accelerator program, which will be given by Dr. Mina Mikhail, Vice President and co-founder of Impactful Health Solutions, or IHS. The MedTech Talent Accelerator program is a new collaborative program between McGill and Ryerson University, offering students supplemental training and experience for careers in the medical technology industry. The training component of the program features flexible online courses, a hackathon, job shadow, training in equity, diversity, and inclusion, and industry seminars like today. The experience component is a 4 to 8 month internship in the medical technology industry. Applications for the first cohort interning in summer 2020 are now closed, but I encourage everyone to learn more about the program and to apply for the next cohort at ryerson.ca/talent accelerator. Today's presentation is being live streamed on YouTube with our partners at Ryerson in attendance, and a recording will be posted following the presentation. We're very excited to have Mina today to present for the Innovation Seminars component of the Accelerator program, which is open to the general public. We'll have a Q&A as time allows following the presentation, so remote viewers, please submit your questions through the link on the screen. Mina has more than 13 years of experience in biomedical research and healthcare innovation. After completing his PhD in biomedical engineering at McGill, he worked as project manager and innovation lead at the Shriners Hospital for Children, Canada, where he initiated and managed 11 innovation projects. He then co-founded IHS to help MedTech companies to take their products into the Middle East. As a serial scientist-entrepreneur, he is the winner of more than 20 awards and recognitions, author of 14 publications in top scientific journals, and has multiple patents. And without further ado, Mina, please join us and take it away.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be back at McGill. That's where I finished my PhD at Mariam Tabrizian's lab in 2014. That's 5 years ago. It seems like ages ago, but anyways, that's only 5 years ago, which is good news. So I want to walk you through a story about how I got here and explain to you what we do at IHS, and I'll give you a company as a case study to showcase what we do and how we help MedTech companies get into the Middle East. And then, I'll wrap it up with some recommendations and challenges that we've been facing, and I'll be happy to, take your questions. So let me start with the story of how I got here. So before I actually do that, I know that the majority here are grad students, right? Is that a correct assumption? Yeah, perfect. Okay, can we do this cheesy exercise, but just humor me. Just close your eyes and just answer. The whole point of closing your eyes, so nobody judges anyone, just close your eyes and raise your hand, if the answer to the question is yes, okay? So close your eyes, please. Who knows exactly what they want to do after their grad studies? Raise your hands. Okay, put your hands down. Who has no clue what they're going to do next after grad school? Raise your hands. Thank you. Okay, open your eyes. By far, the majority has no clue what they want to do after grad school. By far, right? And this is not unique, and this is very common. I was one of those people that did a PhD, and after I finished my PhD, this is what I looked like. I was like, what am I going to do next? Here I am graduating, trying to figure out how to put this cap on. Looked like something out of Harry Potter, but anyways. And I was thinking to myself, what am I going to do next with my life, right? What am I going to do next? It's an important question. And I'm going to take this opportunity here to just throw something out there before I get started, and it is, do not assume the mentality of, I will cross that bridge when I get there. Please, please, think now what you want to do after, and start now taking the necessary steps. I'm assuming if you're here today, that means you want to work in industry, and you're taking the right steps by taking this course. So this is a positive sign. But a course is not enough. You need to go beyond. You need to do more. You need to network. You need to put yourself out there. And this is extremely critical for your career moving forward. So after I kind of didn't figure out what am I going to do next, I decided to do something crazy. I'm going to do something crazy. So I applied to this program that takes essentially MBAs. They don't even look at PhDs. But I was the only PhD in that cohort, and they send us to South Africa or Peru for 2 months and a bit, where we get to do management consulting for not-for-profits that are essentially facing all kinds of different issues. So I spent 2 months and a half in South Africa with MBAs helping this company that was a small NGO that was essentially going bankrupt, and they were helping kids that had chronic illnesses in South Africa. And they essentially needed a financial strategy so that they can survive short-term and long-term. And I was the only PhD amongst all these MBAs from all these top schools, which was fantastic because all of a sudden my eyes were open to this new world of management consulting, thinking numbers, business, international business. So that was an eye-opener for me. And right after that, I came back. I did a very short postdoc at the same lab that I was at, Mariam's lab, a 10-month postdoc. And then I decided, well, one thing I know is academia is not really where I want to fit in right now. I want to do something else. And the nice thing was I worked on a side project with Dr. Hamdi, who's the chief of staff at the Shriners Hospital for Children here in Montreal. And he said, do you want to come on board and start a center of excellence and lead innovation projects within the hospital? I said, absolutely, I do. This is a great opportunity. Yes, I want to move. I want to get a different flavor and different kinds of skills. So I took on that job. And what you see here is one of our projects that we introduced into the hospital, which is how can we use 3D printing to improve patient care in a hospital? And we bought this big printer that looks like a refrigerator. It's humongous. And essentially, what that does is allows us to 3D print patient-specific limbs or bones, like femurs or tibias that are deformed, so that the surgeon practices on it before he goes into surgery. So that means you get better surgical outcomes and you cut down on surgery time, which means saving money, right? So that was just one of 11 projects that I managed at the hospital. So I was really happy in that job. It was a great experience. But there was an entrepreneurial bug in me that wanted to, I got infected with the entrepreneurial bug. I essentially wanted to always start something on my own. So I became a scientist entrepreneur. I started a couple of companies. Today I'm only going to talk about Impactful Health Solutions. There's another company that I also co-founded, Impactful Health Research and Development, but we're only going to focus on IHS today. So I essentially moved from PhD student, getting some international experience, worked as a project manager, innovation lead, and finally as an entrepreneur. Okay, so what is it? Why did we start IHS? Essentially what we found out is Canada actually is a huge producer of MedTech. A lot of MedTech comes out of Canada. And guess what? 94% of that MedTech are small companies, small, medium-sized companies. So you have this pool of companies that are producing all these great innovations in Canada, contributing to the $5 billion revenue that is produced in that industry. And actually, it's a very heavily exporting industry. $3.9 billion of that MedTech is exported. So that's a lot of exportation. So Canada is a big producer of MedTech. And if you look at the United States, the numbers are not very far off, obviously with the exception of much bigger revenue because they're 10 times our size. So 80% of those are SMEs, 41 billion revenue, and 12 billion in export. So now we have all these SMEs who don't necessarily have the skills to expand internationally. They have the desire to expand internationally. They might have, Canadians exporting to the US, which is the low-hanging fruit. Everybody does that. Or Canadians exporting to Europe, which is also, done very often. But going beyond those markets, we found a big gap. Now, let's look at the other side, the Middle East. There are a lot of health challenges in the Middle East, and it comes for different reasons. The GCC countries, or the 6 countries that you see here at the bottom, like those countries, those 6 countries, the GCC countries are well-off countries, and they have a lot of issues because of lifestyle. These people are, on average, very well, they have a good standard of living, they have a good income, but because of that, a lot of things crept in, like obesity, cardiovascular disease, diabetes. So these are some of the prevalent diseases that you would see in the Middle East. And other countries obviously are not very high, like GDP per capita, like the income is not as high, but they also have a lot of issues that need to be dealt with. And my partner, who I'm going to talk about, who is my father, not my brother. Please don't call him my brother. He's my father. Because some people said, he looks like your brother. I'm like, no, he's way older than me. He's my father. So I'm just kidding. He's young. So he has 25 years of experience working in the Middle East. working in different positions in the Middle East, right? So we kind of partnered up together and said, okay, well, how can we come together and as IHS help companies, small, medium-sized companies, to bring their technologies from North America into the Middle East. So this is in one line what we do. We partner with innovative MedTech SMEs in North America to bring their products into 9 countries in the Middle East, because the Middle East is more than 9 countries. We're only focused on 9. All right, so what is our business model? So I don't know how much talk here is done about business, but I'm going to be spending more time on the business side rather than the technical engineering side. We find SMEs that have unique science-based value-added products. And this is key for us. We don't work with anyone who has any product. We really want a company that has an innovative product, but also has regulatory approvals, Health Canada approval, because if they don't, then they're too early for us. Preferably having patents on their technology, so it's protected. So we have a better chance of penetrating the market without having to worry about competition, or at least similar products coming in. But also, they have to be mature enough as a company and have enough funding in order to start thinking global. And I should preface that. You should think global very early on, but what I meant is they should be ready to go global, not think global. They should be ready to go global. We partnered up with them. And essentially, the way we do that is we sign what we call an exclusivity sales agency agreement, where we come to them and say, we are going to be your face in the Middle East. We're going to do all the talking to the 9 countries. We're going to deal with the network of distributors that we have there, and we're going to successfully bring your product into the market. Okay? So this is our role as IHS, is we help them bring their products into the market. My father has the business experience. He has the network in the Middle East. I come in with the science background. I look at the technology and say, is this something truly innovative? Do we really want to take it into the Middle East? Is there a market for it? I kind of do the scientific analysis part of the company. And we have a very strong network of distributors in those 9 countries. So we have highly influential. Some of them are regional. So when you start, again, I'm going to talk business. You have distributors who could be local distributors, and you can have distributors who are regional distributors, i.e. they cover multiple countries. And there's pros and cons to going with either of them. Sometimes it's good to go with the local guy, who's much smaller, and sometimes it's better to go with the big guy, who covers much bigger base, right? Depending on the application, we have to kind of figure out which distributor fits with the product. And one other thing about distributors is you have to make sure that they are solid distributors, i.e. they have a good track record in terms of success in penetrating the market, but they're also solid in terms of their finances. So they're not going to run out of, they're not going to go bankrupt in a few months, and then we're kind of stuck with nothing in that country. And finally, we want to bring on these distributors, and then we sign what's called a 3-way distribution agreement. A 3-way distribution agreement, manufacturer, us, and the distributor all coming together to provide value to the end users. So I'm going to give you an example of a company that we work with, and you will kind of get a sense of what I'm talking about here more practically than theoretically, right? So what do we offer? So we come in, we partner up with them, we're matchmakers, we've found the perfect manufacturer, we've found the perfect distributor, and now we create this partnership, but that's not the end of what we offer as services. So the first thing we work on is we need to classify and register this product in the country of origin. If I'm selling this thing in Saudi Arabia, then I have to go to Saudi Arabia and I have to do the classification and registration. And that could be actually tricky. It's not fairly straightforward as you would think. Some products are very intuitive, like a class 1 medical device, class 2 medical device. That's easy. The classifications are there. The Saudi FDA kind of knows how to work with those things, and it's fairly straightforward. Some products are more complex. So the example I'm going to talk about today is a slightly more complex, but we actually managed to get it done, but I'll tell you why it was more complex. But the first thing we really do is we classify this product in the country of origin, and we register it as well. Then we start with the distributor, finding key opinion leaders. So if the end users are surgeons, then essentially we find surgeons in major hospitals in those countries, and we start having presentations. We pitch the company to them. We'll be like, this is the company, this is what they do, and this is how it's impacting your practice. So we are the ones facing the key opinion leaders on behalf of the company to essentially try to convince them that this is a product that is worth having and it would improve their practice. And the idea, depending on the product, because so every product is different, it would be wise to even encourage them to start a pilot study. So encourage them locally in their hospital, if it's an academic hospital, to say, okay, well, take this product, get a few patients, do a small pilot study, and that's how we start penetrating the market. Because this key opinion leader is looking at the technology and saying, well, I haven't tried this thing before. I'm not so sure about buying it. Well, you say you don't have to buy it. Take it, you do a small pilot study with it, you assess it, and that makes this key opinion leader now, when the results are positive, makes this key opinion leader a champion. That's what we call a champion. So this guy is going to be our reference when we start penetrating other markets. We're going to be like, well, Dr. So-and-so in this hospital did a clinical study. These are the results from the study. They were positive, and now we can move into other markets as well. So this is one example of the market penetration strategy. Another thing, again, I'm throwing business terms at you. But it's very important to think about, how am I going to go to market with this? What is my strategy moving forward? Do I work with a small distributor or a big distributor? Do I go to key opinion leaders who are surgeons? Or maybe they're not even surgeons. Do I go to the pharmacies? Could I sell this thing over the counter? Could I sell this thing? What are my channels? You have to think about channels, because there's many channels that you can sell something through. So what are the channels that I can go through, and what is the best one for this typical product? And then we set a sales forecast. So a sales forecast is, how much are we going to sell over the next 24 months? And anyone who tells you, give me a sales forecast for more than 24 months, just don't listen. Nobody knows what's going to happen more than 2 years from now. It's extremely theoretical. But you can do 2 years. You can do 2 years of estimating sales forecast. And then we track the orders and payments. So we act as the middleman, but we are keeping track of these things because it's important for us, one, to know how the distributor is doing, which brings me to the next point, which is one of the biggest things we do, is we hold the distributor accountable. So the distributor says, okay, I like this product. Let's sign a distribution agreement. Great. Okay, what have you done in the past few months? Where are your sales? How come I'm not getting enough orders? Right? So we keep those distributors accountable. And if these are big distributors, that's one of the cons, right? Because they're like, we're big distributors. We have 1,000 products in our portfolio. We're not going to sit here and dedicate, a sales team to your one SKU, like one product, right? But we have to be very careful about who to pick because of this reason, and we hold them accountable to those estimates. Sometimes, it doesn't happen often, but sometimes we can go on and train the sales team on the ground. So my father and I are bilingual, we speak Arabic, English, fluently. So we can go there and we can be, kind of the trainers for the sales team, depending on if they need us or not. We haven't done this often, but it's one of the things we do often. And finally, sales reporting. So this is just a deliverable that we give our manufacturer partners saying, this is the sales. Obviously, they keep track themselves, but here are the sales and here are the forecast predicting in the next 24 months. So just to give you a quick overview, so this is my father, not my brother, all right? So he finished his pharmacy degree. He's the president and marketing lead. He has 25 years of experience in 20 countries in the Middle East. So not just the 9, but 20 countries. He's managed projects throughout his life. He worked in Nestle. He was a senior manager in Nestle for many, many, many years, 25 plus. And so he worked in many parts of North Africa and in the Gulf region as well. And he's successfully launched multiple multi-million-dollar products in Nestle. In my side, I come in with a PhD in biomedical engineering from McGill. I have the R&D experience, and working in a hospital, I understand healthcare innovation. What that means is I don't only understand what it looks like on the bench, like in the lab, but also what it means to transfer that into a healthcare setting and what is involved there. And I have a lot of entrepreneurial experience and publications, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So the areas of focus for us, for the Middle East, for now, are diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and plastic surgery. Diabetes is a big problem. So the example I'm going to give is really about diabetes. Cardiovascular disease, all of these things are related, right? In one sense or another. Obesity becoming kind of the linking factor there, and plastic surgery as well. So let's start with the case study. So I want to introduce you to a company that we've worked very closely with for 1.5 years now. And they are coming out of Halifax, Nova Scotia, started by a professor called Paul Gratzer and his partner, Sean Margaret. And I'll introduce you to the product via a video. Nope. Oh, there's the video. I'm going to go back later to that slide. Okay.
D-Cell Technologies, Inc., located in Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada, focuses on developing innovative wound care solutions to accelerate healing and improve patients' quality of life. To this end, D-Cell is pleased to introduce DermGen, a decellularized dermal matrix manufactured in Canada for the management of acute and chronic wounds. DermGen is created from donated human skin. The skin is treated with an advanced process that removes cellular components and immunogens that are known sources of rejection, while leaving the structural extracellular matrix of the tissue intact. Maintaining the extracellular matrix is essential as it provides cell signaling and physical cues that accelerate healing. Finally, during processing, potential bacteria are also deactivated and removed, resulting in a sterile, safe, and effective biological scaffold. The natural structure and composition of the matrix that is preserved in DermGen interacts with and stimulates the patient's body to accelerate healing and regeneration. Cell matrix instability is common in chronic wounds, resulting in a cycle of inflammation that is responsible for prolonging the healing process. DermGen provides cell matrix interactions that halts the chronic inflammatory cycle and stimulates cells to move on to healing and tissue regeneration. DermGen has been successfully used in the management of diabetic foot ulcers and showed significant reduction in healing time with an average 50% decrease in wound size by 1 week and complete wound healing by 3 weeks after its application. DermGen is packaged in a sterile container. DermGen is provided in a hydrated state and is ready to use. DermGen is provided with the basement membrane upper surface that propels blood and lower surface that absorbs blood. To identify the surfaces, a small V-notch is provided. The V-notch that indicates the basement membrane is on the upper surface, where the V-notch is located in the upper right-hand corner of the graft. DermGen is available in several sizes to match the size of the wound to be treated. DermGen may also be cut to better fit the dimensions of the wound bed. Once the wound bed is properly debrided, presenting a bloody wound surface, DermGen can be applied with the DermGen side in contact with the wound surface. Note that DermGen normally does not require securing with sutures or staples to the wound site if utilized properly. Dressings used with DermGen should include a non-adherent contact layer that provides moisture balance to avoid maceration. It is recommended that dry gauze then be wrapped around the dressing to add slight pressure to the wound site in order to prevent movement of DermGen during the first 1 to 2 weeks of healing. Wound dressings should be changed no sooner than weekly for best results to allow the graft to be incorporated and remodeled by the wound bed. It is important to use proper offloading devices and protocols in combination with DermGen to enable healing. DermGen usually requires only one application to achieve expected outcomes. On average, complete epithelialization should be achieved within 3 to 4 weeks after treatment, and greater than 50% wound healing should be achieved within 2 weeks after treatment. For more information on DermGen, go to www.dcelltechnologies.com or contact D-Cell Technology Inc. by phone or email.
Bit of a story here about D-Cell, and I think it's interesting because I think it might happen to you guys. So Dr. Paul Gratzer, who is the co-founder of D-Cell, he taught me, when I was an undergrad, in my third year undergrad, he taught me the biomaterials class. And he got me interested in biomaterials. So if it wasn't for him, I would not have done a master's and a PhD in biomaterials. But because of his class, I got so interested in biomaterials, I was like, I want to pursue this further. At the time, I said only masters, and then I kind of went on to do a PhD. But he really got me interested in biomaterials. So I owe it to him in getting me interested in that space. And here we are, 4 years later. No, that's not true. That was a long time ago when I did my undergrad. It was 2005, so that here we are like 14 years later. I shouldn't have said that out loud. Anyways, 14 years later, we're working together, and I'm helping him take his product into the Middle East. So you never know how this might work out for you guys. So diabetes, humongous problem in the Middle East. Look at the numbers. And I think these numbers are valued. I think these numbers are higher, actually. But based on some of the market research reports and scientific reports that I found, look at Saudi Arabia. Around 18% of their population between 20 and 79 have diabetes. Look at the global average. It's around 8. Canada's around 7.5 or 8. It's very close to the global average. All the 9 countries that we cover are much higher than the global average in terms of incidence of diabetes. So diabetes is a huge problem in the Middle East, right? 3.4 million individuals are living with diabetes in this population, 20 to 79. In Saudi Arabia alone, 3.4 million. And out of those, 510,000 will eventually get diabetic foot ulcers. So diabetic foot ulcers is a secondary effect to having diabetes, right? It's a complication of having diabetes. So let's look at some other numbers. I'm going to skip to the video. Major problem in the Middle East. If you have DFUs, that increases the healthcare expenditure 6 times to take care of you as a patient, as opposed to if you just have diabetes. It's costing 6 times more if you have DFUs. And a 20%, close to 20% amputation rate, right? And this is all numbers from Saudi Arabia. We have to bring, again, this is important for you. If you're working in that market, if I'm pitching this to a surgeon in Saudi Arabia, I have to use numbers from Saudi Arabia, right? So these are numbers coming out of Saudi Arabia. The problem is so prevalent that they have an annual conference dedicated just to diabetic foot ulcers. It's called the Gulf Diabetic Foot Conference. They have it annually, and it takes place in different countries every year. Why? Why is DFU a problem in actually the GCC countries specifically, the 6 countries? It's because there's a lot of people wear open footwear. If you're wearing open footwear and you have a DFU, chances of injury are higher, chances of contamination are higher. And if you're living far away, if you're living in the rural areas of Saudi Arabia, for example, you don't have access to hospitals, that means you're just, this ulcer is just getting contaminated and gets worse and worse with time, and you're not doing anything about it, right? So there is a big problem with treatment of DFUs in the Middle East. So all of a sudden, when we look at the product and we look at the market, you see the tremendous potential that this product can bring to a market like the Middle East. So I'm going to go quickly. I know the video mentioned a bunch of advantages of DermGen, which is the product produced by D-Cell, but I'm going to go through some of the really key points here. So if you didn't catch it, it's decellularized human tissue. I want you to keep that in mind, because when we go to the regulatory process, that will actually introduce the complication. This is human tissue that's been decellularized. So they have a proprietary automated technique that guarantees safety and functionality of the product. So the ECM stands for extracellular matrix, is intact. This is really their key, is the decellularization process does not damage the extracellular matrix and the architecture in skin. It maintains that. It's safe. It comes in a sterile packaging, so no sterilization process has to be done by the surgeon or the clinician. It's easy to use. It already comes hydrated. There's no need for a hydration step, which other products require. It's a one-time application. This is one of the biggest selling points. If I'm going to a hospital and saying, what are you currently using for DFUs? We're using X. How many times do you need to replace X? Oh, well, the patient has to come in every 2 weeks and introduce a new graft or a new product on it. So how many products do you need? We need like 5 or 6. Well, this is a one-time application. So imagine the cost reduction in terms of clinical care that can be introduced with this product. 100% wound closure on an average of 3 weeks. Just to give you a reference, I'll show you a reference here actually in the next slide, but this is actually very impressive. Average of 3 weeks to close a wound. That's very impressive. No need for suturing or stapling. If I'm going to treat someone with a DFU and then I'm going to staple something, you're introducing a new injury, If you don't need it, all the better, right? And it can be stored at room temperature. And here's something relevant to the Middle East. Temperature stable up to 30 degrees C. This is important for us to know. First question we had to ask. If I'm making an order, sent it to a distributor in Saudi Arabia, and this thing is sitting on the tarmac for I don't know how many hours, and the thing heats up, is it stable? It's important for us to know, right? And it's biodegradable. So essentially, it gets resorbed into the wound, the skin forms into the wound and closes it up, so there's no need to remove it. It's biodegradable. Has up to 5 years of shelf life. This is key when you're dealing with distributors. The distributor is going to come to me like, I'm going to order thousands of those things. How long can I keep them for? Is it a year, and then I have to chuck them if I don't sell them? No, 5 years shelf life. That's pretty good. And finally, it reduces the overall cost of the episode of care of diabetic foot ulcers, which is one of the biggest selling points when we talk to surgeons, right? So when it came to the regulatory side, how is this thing regulated in Canada? Can anyone venture a guess? Yeah?
It'd be class 4, right? 'Cause it has
Nope. Not a class 4. Any other guesses? Oh, sorry. She said that it was a class 4 medical device, but it's not. It's not a class 4 medical device. Any other ideas?
Would it be a class 3? Because it doesn't technically have cells and stuff like that, right? And you would have removed all the
Yeah.
toxins and stuff. But it would still be like a pretty highly class, like high class.
Nope, it's not a class 3 either. DermGen is classified in Canada under the cells, tissues, and organs, which essentially is treated just like it's a tissue graft. And from a regulatory point of view, this is great for them. If you can regulate under the cells, tissues, and organs, that means you actually don't need the clinical trials to go to market. You do need clinical trials to support your claims. You can't claim anything if you haven't, and they have done clinical trials. But it's not a requirement in order to start selling in Canada. It's under the CTO. Does anyone know what is the equivalent of that in the States? Maybe I'm asking too much regulatory, but this is important for industry. You need to know some of the regulatory sides of things. In the States, and it's not on the slide, it's regulated under Human Cells and Tissues Products, HCTP, Section 361 to be specific. That is what regulates products like this, and they require certain things. One is it's minimally manipulated. Two, it's homologous use. Minimally manipulated means here we're just getting rid of the cells, but we're maintaining the structure of the extracellular matrix. Homologous use means I am replacing skin by skin. Like I'm not taking a skin tissue, putting it in the heart, because that's not homologous use, right? Homologous use, tissue going to the similar tissue. So this is how they got regulated in Canada, which was great. They had to meet something called the USP 71 sterility standards, which is by the AATP, which is the American Association of Tissue Banks. So they had to meet, the requirement was they had to make sure that this thing is sterile. So they had to meet those requirements, and they did, which is great. So let me tell you about, as an example, I don't have a slide for it, but I'll just mention. When we went to Saudi Arabia, we said, they looked at this and they said, this is human skin that is decellularized. They don't have the equivalent of a CTO in Saudi Arabia. They don't have the equivalent of an HCTP in Saudi Arabia. So that was the challenge for us, is how do we position this product in Saudi Arabia? And we worked with a distributor who are one of our best partners, actually. Really, really good partners. And they went ahead and we submitted an application for a classification of this product, and it was classified under biological products. So it was classified as a biological product, which means, again, no need for clinical trials in order to start marketing it, but there's a license that needs to be brought in every time you want to ship a product into the country. So that was one of our learning experiences about regulatory process in the Middle East. So this also shows you another advantage of having DermGen versus other competitors. These are all competitors to DermGen, right? Look at the price point, 1,441, and so forth, and multiple applications. But the one thing I want you to look at is the percent healed at 12 weeks. Remember how I said 3 weeks is their average healing time? Look at these products, 12 weeks. So the best one can close 50% of the wound at 12 weeks. And if you have a product that can close the wound at an average of 3 weeks and is at a price point that is much lower, $800, then you have a very competitive product. So here's exactly our business model slide, and I just replaced some of the kind of theoretical stuff with a real life situation. Our manufacturer is D-Cell, their product is DermGen. The green means we're very advanced in those countries. We're very advanced in Saudi Arabia and Bahrain and Lebanon. Advanced means classification and registration, potentially doing some clinical studies as well, right? The yellow countries is working with a regional distributor that is going to take it in all these countries, one shot. So we have individual, like Saudi Arabia and Bahrain. These are all individual distributors, but we have a regional distributor for the other countries. And that was one of our strategies, is to work with individual distributors first and then work with regional distributors later. It's actually better for a lot of reasons, but anyways. So now I'm going to zoom out of the case study. I'm going to tell you very quickly what are some of the external challenges to us as a company. religious requirements is actually a big component of working in the Middle East. If you're starting to sell stuff in the GCC countries, it's the Islamic rule, like there's Islamic laws that you have to abide by, right? So if you have a product that has porcine material, guess what? You're going to have a lot of issues bringing this in, right? So you have to be very much aware of what are the religious requirements. The first thing we did is, how does the religious, the laws talk about human tissue? Because we're bringing in human tissue, right? Decellularized, yes, but still human tissue. So we had to go through the process of figuring out how we would navigate in that environment, and we managed, so it was pretty good. The other thing is changes in regulation, and this happens, like the EU is changing some of their regulations, their CE marks. So there is a constant change in regulations around the world, and the same thing in the Middle East. So we have to be very careful and have to be always up to date with what's happening in that context. And finally, political instability. This is actually one of our biggest challenges working in the Middle East, right? This is Lebanon. I mean, you know about what's happening in Lebanon right now. And we were very advanced in Lebanon with one of the products, actually multiple products, but everything kind of stopped because of the current situation in Lebanon. So keeping in mind the political instability that can happen in the region is very important for us. Finally, I'm going to talk about some of the internal challenges, as in within the company, what are some of the challenges for us? Cash flow is a challenge, right? Because you're dealing with distributors who have their own pay terms and the manufacturer who have their own pay terms, and we get paid last. Because the distributor pays the manufacturer pays us our commission for doing the work. So cash flow is not that good in this business model. And right now we're thinking about ways in order to improve that. If we start working with a small company, have a unique product, lo and behold, a year or two from now, a big company like Johnson & Johnson or Medtronic or these giants acquires this company. So all of a sudden, we've been working with those companies for maybe a year, 2 years, and all of a sudden they get acquired, and we kind of are in standstill. So we have to negotiate with Johnson & Johnson. How do we keep doing this together? Or if you want to do your own distribution, because you guys are giants, you have your own distribution networks, then there's some clauses in the contract that protects us from that happening. And finally is distribution engagement. Distributors are out there because they believe that there's a product that will sell and they will make a good margin out of it. But how do we keep them engaged to keep putting the time and effort into these products, especially when you have small to medium-sized companies with one product? These distributors are dealing with guys who have come in with thousands of products, portfolio. Now you're coming to them with I have one product to give you. So how much of your sales team are you going to allocate so that, for the success of this one product? So it's key for us to keep them engaged and keep them interested. Finally, I'm going to close with a few remarks. Think global early on. Whatever product you develop does not necessarily mean that Canada is your first and low-hanging fruit in terms of a market. It could be, but think global early on. So like I showed you diabetes, 18% versus 7% in Canada prevalence. So the market in the Middle East is huge. So starting there might actually be very beneficial. So it's important to start thinking about the market early on. Understand the real global needs. I know you guys are not there yet. You're not manufacturing, but you might be working in companies that are global. So you need to understand some of those things. What are the global needs in terms of healthcare issues? We talked about diabetes being an issue in the Middle East. What are the other issues in other parts of the world? Find the right partners early on. So this is us. Find the right people that would help you to take those products into those regions. Develop with regulatory approvals in mind. If I know that diabetes is a big issue, and I'm developing a scaffold-based biomaterial that I want to take for DFUs, and I'm using porcine material, you've already eliminated a big chunk of the world. It's better to know early on where your market is and start developing according to that, because you know eventually where it's going. IP protection is key for us and for the companies, for the manufacturers. And yeah, I guess this is us again. If there's something, or if there's interest in those with SMEs that you know of, that people want to take their products into the Middle East, we'd be happy to chat with them as well. So I'm done. Thank you very much. And yeah, I'm happy to take questions.
Okay, thank you, Mina, for a very insightful presentation. Let's open it up for Q&A. We have a little bit of time. Let's start with a question from McGill, but our remote viewers can submit a question through the link on the slide. So does anyone here have a question? Sure.
Hi, thank you. Very cool. My question pertains to D-Cell
Yeah.
more than your business model.
Yeah.
So you said that they get skin from donors. I see that as potential bottleneck for scale up later on. Do you know like what their strategy is for potential scale up?
Right. It actually is not, right? Because when you think about tissue banks, think about how many tissue banks are there just in Canada and how many are there in the States and how many are there in Europe. So the supply globally is actually much bigger than you think. So for scaling up, it's actually not an issue. So they've done this exercise where they collaborate with RegenMed. RegenMed is their kind of current licensed manufacturer. So they have the automation process. RegenMed is kind of adopting that and scaling it up. And RegenMed is in Thunder Bay in Northern Ontario. So these guys are centralized tissue banks. So more and more you're going to have these centralized tissue banks where they're getting all these tissues from different hospitals, right? Or other smaller tissue banks. And that means that it actually becomes easier for them if they deal with those centralized tissue banks, that they would have this constant supply of tissue. If anything, it's not a bottleneck. The supply is actually not bad at all. It would allow them to scale up.
Thank you very much. Any other questions here at McGill? Sure.
Cool talk, thanks.
All right.
So the question that you are approaching to small companies mostly.
Yeah.
How can you find them? Because if they're small, probably it's not easy to find them. If it's just 4 guys in a room with one product, do you actually wait for them to come to you?
No, we don't. We actually go scouting. We go finding those. If there are 4 guys in a room and we can't find them, that means they're not ready for what we're doing yet, right? They're only ready if they have their approvals done, they have their IP protection done, and they actually have an active website. Not necessarily doesn't matter if they have, but they are advanced enough that they at least can also manufacture. So one of the things that we faced is, and this happened with one of our products. They were small, not quite, and we were learning at the time as a company. We're only 3 years old, right? We're still learning too. And essentially, they had a product, and all of a sudden, we had one of our distributors come to us and say, "I want 1,000 pieces." And we're like, "Oh, this is great. This business is going to start very early on for this." Great. But guess what? They couldn't actually make the 1,000 pieces. They didn't have the capacity to manufacture 1,000 pieces in the given time. So the company is small to medium sized, but they have to be at a certain maturity level that they can actually meet the demand, but also have all the other requirements like regulatory, IP, and above. So we actually go looking for those companies. We had a few approach us, but the majority of the time it's us approaching them. Yeah.
You mentioned that the patents that you're looking for, the technology has to be patented. But I'm curious, do you look for patents that, if the company has the patent in those countries that you're going into? Is that a requirement?
Well, yes and no. Yes and no. Yes, it would be nice for us to have that, but the reality is it's not always the case, right? The reality is different. The reality is IP or filing patents is very expensive. So you cannot really cover a lot of countries. So you tend to cover Europe, North America, maybe Southeast Asia, and that's it, right? So the reality is doesn't really happen. We would like it to be the case that the patents are protected in the countries that we are taking the product into, but it's not always the case. The important thing about patents is so that we can differentiate the company can differentiate itself from competitors and kind of protect itself, So yes, it would be nice to have it in those countries, but it's not always the case.
Okay, we are actually out of time.
Oh, okay.
So, Mina, I want to thank you so much for your great presentation.
Thank you. Thanks.
And just 1 second to just give you a token of our gratitude.
Oh, thank you.
Please take this.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Thanks. Appreciate it.